Welcome into the PFF podcast. Steve Palazzolo back here with Zac Robinson, our QB guru, doing what we always do here on a Tuesday, going back and looking at some of the best, worst, in-between quarterback performances from the week. It is our usual Tuesday podcast, formerly the Big Time Throwcast, a name that I still love. I still love it. Tweet us and let us know if you love or hate that name. I still believe in the Big Time Throwcast, but we're here as part of the PFF podcast. Zach, welcome back. And we had a few bye weeks this week. We had some interesting names playing quarterback this week. Not as many high-profile names from start to finish when you were watching every throw, huh?
There weren't that many, kind of marquee matchups. You had Dak and Rodgers. Then you had the 04 class of Rivers and Eli there. That was a pretty good game. But you're right. Other than that, it was kind of not a down week quarterback wise, but just good play here, some poor play there, and just kind of an average week overall.
Yeah, some good, some bad. We'll get into more of that 2004 class. I also just want to start out, or let me at least set the table here. We're going to talk about Ben Roethlisberger. He had 5 interceptions for the Pittsburgh Steelers, speaking of the class of 2004. So we'll talk about him specifically and some of his classmates, Eli and Rivers, a little bit later on. We'll talk a little Carson Wentz. He had a nice game against the Arizona Cardinals. Of course, Eagles fans never happy at all with PFF. Never. So we'll explain some of his grading to this point, pull out some numbers on Wentz. Alex Smith, MVP candidate for the Kansas City Chiefs, continues to roll with a great game against the Houston Texans. And then we'll get into a little bit of debate. We'll see if we debate. I don't know what the answer is going to be, but some NFL executives were discussing Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, Dak Prescott. Who do you want? That class of 2016, who would you want going forward? And something that looks like maybe a clear favorite a year ago at this time. Maybe not as clear here in year 2. So we'll debate that a little bit before getting into a few more quarterbacks as well. And before we dive into Roethlisberger, general discussion, Zach. Look, you're somewhat new to the PFF team, so I'll let you handle some of this, and I'll give my take. Stats, grades, what we do, how we isolate the quarterback versus the scheme, versus the receiver, versus the coverage, versus pressure, all these different things that go into PFF grading. I do feel like we always need to do a better job or do more of explaining what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish, and why grades don't always match up with stats. And I'm not just speaking directly to Eagles fans who are saying, Carson Wentz had 4 touchdowns, how is he not the best? How is his grade not that great? He had a solid grade, but sometimes the touchdowns can skew perception and stats can skew perception. Give me your take on what you've seen here as a fairly new PFFer over the last couple of years, and what you feel like we're trying to accomplish and how we go about doing it.
Yeah, and when I first started doing stuff with you guys, this was back 2 summers ago now. It took a little time to get the system down and see how it was, kind of all playing out. And now that I've been into it for a while here, everything makes total sense in terms of, the best way I think I've heard it put was contribution to production. And how do you contribute to the production of the play? Is it a wide open scheme design play that you don't have to, doesn't require a whole lot of, challenging attempt of a throw, coverage busts, those things. And then a lot of the time it's absolving the quarterback from mistakes as well, where, it might look like an awful interception and you come back and you look at the wide receiver's angle coming out, and maybe he did something funny at the top of the route that threw off the entire thing. So it definitely works both ways for, helping QBs out when maybe, if the stat line looks really bad and some of those plays look really bad, and then it also swings the other way. So it makes a ton of sense now that I'm fully entrenched in doing it. I think it's really the best way to grade quarterbacks. Not to be biased here, but it really is. It makes a lot of sense, and we get so wrapped up in just the hard stat line from the game and check out the box score. There's you got to peel back the layers on play in the NFL and play especially at the quarterback position.
I don't sense any bias because you're entrenched in it. You're seeing it And look, I don't think anything is perfect by any means. I do believe in the system as well, and we're always trying to improve it. We're always looking to improve it. We've done some other, what I feel is groundbreaking work as far as accuracy charting and all these different things that will be kind of rolling into the system at some point in the near future as well, hopefully.
Yeah.
So we're still just scratching the surface, but I like what you said, contribution to production, because without going off on too much of a tangent, the thing I always say is there are no 5 numbers in football that can paint a picture like the 5 key numbers that describe a quarterback performance, the traditional stats of completions, attempts, touchdowns, interceptions, and yards. You just throw those 5 numbers out there and you say, hey, this guy played well, he played poorly, he was average, whatever it might be. So, and especially once you see that 4 touchdowns or 5 touchdowns, and we had 2 examples this week. Carson Wentz, who we will talk about in detail, he had 4 touchdowns against 1 interception. Deshaun Watson had 5 touchdowns against no interceptions. And if you just look at stat lines, you're like, man, these guys played incredibly. But there's always context, even behind a touchdown, which of course is the goal of the offense, to score touchdowns. But like you said, the contribution to that production. So the one example I'll use, with PFF, we grade the throw. And once the throw's made, we factor in a lot of things in that throw. But then what happens after the throw does not necessarily change the grade. So, somebody was saying, hey, Joe Flacco graded well and Carson Wentz graded well and Flacco didn't throw a touchdown. Well, just one example. Flacco starts the game with this beautiful deep ball against single coverage. A guy has a step, hits him in stride pretty much, and it's a really nice throw. Probably gets a similar grade to Carson Wentz's pass. Deep post to Nelson Aguilar, had about a step of separation, makes the catch. The difference on that is Aguilar juked 2 guys and turned that into a touchdown, which again doesn't change the throw, doesn't change Flacco's throw, doesn't change Wentz's throw, but completely changes his stat line for the better. And it does skew your perception of how well Wentz may have played. So, again, those are the types of things where the stat line doesn't always match the grades, and we're just trying to add the proper context to what went in to those throws.
Right. Yeah, and I think almost a better way to do it is watch the game, look at the stat line afterwards, and then realize, okay, that didn't match up how that guy really played, because there's numerous times that you can end up on the good side of a stat line, and then you see him after the game, and I guess personally you see it after the game, you're like, man, I did not play all that well at all, but my stats look decent here, dropped interception here that saved it. So always good to get the context of the grades, and I think that like you said, perfecting everything, it's not completely perfect, but it certainly paints the best picture, I think, of how to judge quarterback play.
So we could do a whole podcast on this, and we'll talk more about this probably as the season goes with specific examples, and then maybe dedicate a whole hour to it in the off season and get into some of the nuts and bolts. We did it this off season too, diving back into our grading system at all different types. It would passing, receiving, coverage, run blocking, all offensive line. So go check that out in the archive. Let's get into Week 5. Ben Roethlisberger, I mentioned with the Steelers, 5 interceptions. And here's an example. Once you see this 5 interceptions, it's like, man, he played the worst game of his career. And while he certainly was not good, Ben was not good on Sunday against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Some of these interceptions, he did not deserve to throw 5, I don't believe. So
right.
Some of them were skewed a little bit. But what'd you see from Ben, not only in this game, but all season? It's just been a blah season for Roethlisberger in a year that it's supposed to be this high-powered, explosive Pittsburgh offense with a good offensive line and all these playmakers. What have you seen from him so far, and specifically on Sunday?
Yeah, the stat line from last week, it looked 10 times worse than it was. It wasn't a great game. Some overthrows on a pick that just barely off on ball placement. Then a pass gets batted at the line of scrimmage that goes right to Telvin Smith. He takes for a pick 6 that it almost looked like it was thrown right to him if you're just looking at the broadcast. But
yeah, at first on broadcast, I was like, Ben, what are you doing? Yeah.
Right. So you see some of the plays and you're like, man, it was honestly just one of those games. Felt just kind of off from the get-go. Didn't didn't have the same type of feel overall. Like, even trying to get a screen, creativity to kind of get it to a guy or around some arms, it just wasn't there. Was getting kind of stuck on some reads. So it was an off game. I think so far he's just looked a little out of sorts in too many parts of the games and missing some pre-snap stuff and where to go with the football and get the ball out of his hands. So I think, it was a weird game. Played, under duress last week, was 6 for 15, 3 picks, 8.3 passer rating. So that's kind of where the majority of the mistakes came, with slight pressure in his face and just barely off on the throws.
Yeah, look, it wasn't good overall, and from a PFF standpoint, I mentioned last year he got away with a lot of passes, high percentage of turnover-worthy plays last year, didn't always translate into actual interception numbers. I feel like that is starting to regress back to the mean, so to speak, this year. So you're starting to see that statistically, just from a mental standpoint, because again, this is where you could bring some unique insight to this whole thing. Roethlisberger this offseason is talking about retirement. He's talking about, what the future is going to be. Doesn't sound like he's going to be all in. And even just this past week, making comments, I don't know if we're going to figure it out. I forget what the exact phrasing was. How much does that psyche hurt him, perhaps? Because, again, I mentioned it to Sam on the Week 5 review podcast. Roethlisberger seems like that competitor that you should just shrug it off and say, he'll bounce back. He's too competitive not to bounce back. But this looks like it could be more of a snowball situation for him, and could it actually get worse for Pittsburgh?
Gosh, I don't know. You're right. Hearing all the talk in the off season and just kind of really the organization as a whole, with Antonio Brown on the sideline and Le'Veon Bell holding out, there's just a lot of side stuff going on as a team. So he's fed into that a little bit, and I kind of saw his comments like he's going to be the Big Ben and some of these other guys we discussed off air, like Rodgers last year wasn't playing all that well, and then they just kick it into another gear. I think he was kind of saying that stuff to set himself up for a big middle part of the season and down the stretch, because I do think they'll figure it out. They'll get things going, and maybe just games like these to take that step and say, all right, things aren't going well. Let's figure it out. So I think that maybe some of his comments had fed into the play, but now it's back against the wall. Not necessarily that far against the wall, but they're coming off a performance like that. They got to get out and play better football.
Yeah, look, they're not out of it by any means, and I'm not ready to write off Big Ben at all. But going back to the numbers and where he stands so far this season, 10th highest percentage of turnover-worthy plays, has 9. We have him with 9 turnover-worthy plays on the season, despite how many interceptions right now? We had the 7 total interceptions. So again, not every interception is considered turnover-worthy, and not every turnover-worthy play turns into an interception, but maybe the numbers are a little bit worse than he's playing right now. But if you do look at just his PFF grades, all a part of PFF Edge and Elite, 74.3, that would be the lowest grade that he's posted since 2006. And 06 was before he was really a star. They had won the Super Bowl in 2005. He didn't really become, one of the top tier type of quarterbacks until probably 2007 in our grading. And then last year, 83.4 overall grade. That was his lowest since 2008. So we are talking about a guy who looked like he was he was peaking, Zach. I mean, he looked like 2014 and 15 looked like two of the best seasons we've seen from him. 2015 was the best season we've seen from him. And then step back last year, and so far a step back in 2017. But I'm with you. I'm not ready to write him off. There's too much of a track record there. He still has Antonio Brown. Martavis Bryant is also still there, and when he's at his best, one of the best deep threats in the NFL. So I still have faith that they're going to be okay in Pittsburgh.
I think so. I think, from just looking at his physically and how he's moving around, he is not moving around as well. To be expected, the guy's taking a ton of hits, but just some of those plays that I thought, just especially watching last week, where maybe he gave up on the play a little bit too early, feeling the pressure, the rush a little bit early in that game, where plays you might see him extend it just a touch more and wait for that next window to open up, or the next layer, the receiver in the route, and instead he's kind of getting the ball out quickly and not holding on. So maybe he's feeling a little bit of his age there and knowing he can't extend and do some of those outside structure plays that we see so much, but definitely stood out last week. He was getting the ball out kind of relatively quick in the progression when the protection may have allowed for him to look further down the field.
That is an interesting point on Roethlisberger, and I think it's one that we can circle back to. We will discuss the 2004 draft class of Ben, Rivers, and Manning a little bit later on. As a quick aside, Zach, I've hit this point in life where I'm 35 years old, and all of a sudden professional athletes are they're being called old, and they're breaking down, and their careers are ending, and they're my age,
That's tough. Yeah.
It is tough. I mean, I am a retired professional athlete, but it wasn't like I was more forced out than anything. It's like, all right, it's time to move on and get married and get to the next part of life as a football analyst. But now we're at the point where people my age are considered falling apart and beat up and old and the laughing stock of whatever league they're in. It kind of hits home a little bit.
Sure, I can't imagine, man. I'm 31 myself, and that seems I'm supposed to be in the prime, but 37. That's
no,
not
35,
good,
Zach. 35.
Oh, 35. You're 35.
Come on. Don't push me forward too much here.
You got a couple good years left, and you got to hang it up though.
Yeah, that's understandable. I never really officially retired from baseball. I'm still waiting to make that perfect official retirement, and maybe have the San Francisco Giants sign me to the old one-day contract so I could retire properly. But you are still in your prime. We were chucking around the office and all that stuff. You still have it. I could see it. So
I got something there. It's not much, but it's something. Yeah.
Enjoy it while it lasts. All right. Enough about me getting old. We discussed Carson Wentz a little bit earlier. Let's discuss further. Good, solid game against the Arizona Cardinals. We mentioned the 4 touchdowns. Did have 1 interception thrown in the red zone or in the end zone late in the first half, I believe it was. What have you seen from Wentz and the Eagles' offense and what they're doing with him? Quick number on him. Right now, number 3 in the NFL in positively graded throws as a percentage, but also number 10 in negatively graded throws. That went down just a little bit this past week. So a little boom or bust to his game. It's all evening off to the number 8 PFF grade so far through 5 weeks. Number 8 at 80.1. What did you see from Wentz on Sunday against Arizona?
He was solid throughout. You mentioned the one mistake, bad interception, out and up, leads to the free safety there the whole time and throws it right to him. That was really his worst play of the game. Didn't have a whole lot of bad plays after that. Stayed in rhythm pretty well throughout the game. Made really good pre-snap decisions. Was accurate on all that stuff. They've kind of designed the offense, like any offense should, just perfectly around his strengths and what he does best with the RPOs, the run-pass options, quick game, play action to get their shot plays down the field, play action boot, and then they get creative formationally or spread them out on either third down and red zone. That's just what they are. They're not trying to trick you with a bunch of things, and he's running that efficiently. Now, there's been times where you mentioned the turnover-worthy plays where he's playing hero ball at times and trying to chuck stuff that's there. I think the biggest thing that he's got to improve on really heading forward is finding completions under pressure. Last week it was a little bit better, but he has the lowest adjusted accuracy in the NFL under pressure at 47.2. So that's taking out drops and throwaways and things like that. He's still only completing 47.2%. So he's playing better, and I think he's playing well, but he's got to get that number up and find some outlets, find some check downs kind of late in the down and help move the chains that way as well. So
just some of the numbers that are associated with Wentz right now remind me of Andrew Luck a few years ago, where Luck was that guy that statistically looked pretty good, And I think if you were a Colts fan a couple years ago, you're like, yes, this is my guy. Like, this is our quarterback for the future. He's converting these tough third downs, and he's just getting the job done. And I think there's that element to Wentz right now. I know Eagles fans and everybody's citing his third down numbers. He is leading the NFL. I believe it is in passer rating on third down. And he's our top-graded third down quarterback. So I could see when you're watching the game, you're like, man, this guy just keeps making big play after big play. But the other part that reminds me of Luck are those turnover-worthy plays. He's still fifth highest in the NFL in turnover-worthy play percentage, even though the interception totals aren't that high. Some of those turnover-worthy plays have been fumbles that he got away with early in the season. And again, that stuff should even out a little bit over time. But there's a lot of positive and there's a lot of negative there with Wentz, which, again, I find fascinating. That was a big thing with Luck a few years ago, where our grade was a little bit lower than maybe the stats would show. And I don't even know if I'd say that for Wentz. I think our grade in the stats match up pretty well. I think he's 7th or 8th in passer rating. He's 8th in our PFF grades. It all evens off pretty well with Wentz, and I'm pretty happy with our evaluation on him so far.
No, I'm with you. I think he's definitely progressed from what we saw, in the latter half of the season, where you saw overthrows over the middle and just kind of not really confident in what he was seeing. And he has those moments. Last week was a big step in the right direction. I thought just under pressure, there was a few times that he took a sack instead of letting one go. He had a backside dig that was coming across, and you could tell everything inside of him wanted to try to let this thing go under pressure, and he held back and didn't throw it. So some of those decisions not to throw are kind of his next step, because if he can run this, efficient way of offense, and he doesn't have to be Aaron Rodgers, and he may not ever get to that point, which is fine. He can play his style and be surrounded by a good supporting cast, a good defense, and win a lot of games. So if he plays to his strengths like they're doing right now, he's going to continue to grade pretty well, and I think stat-wise and through our grades.
One question about Wentz. You and I both had a similar question. His ability to just be, I don't know what the right word is, but just nimble enough in the pocket. I think he's a good athlete when he gets outside the pocket and has to run a little bit, but just having that footwork to get from one read to the next. There were times early in the season where we pointed it out, like, hey, that's pretty good. He made that one throw on a dig route back of the end zone, which was like, man, that he got back to the dig and looked smooth doing it. He didn't always do that last year. He kind of gets stuck in the pocket at times. Is that something, do you think that they're, because of the RPOs and maybe simplifying some reads there, is that what you're talking about as far as playing to his strengths? He doesn't have to do that as much, or is he getting a little bit better at it when he does have to do that?
I think it's more so they're playing to his strengths and able to keep him in rhythm and stay ahead of schedule and stay ahead of the chains and those things. So I think where he's progressed a little bit in that area and it showed up maybe more times than last year, it's still not enough to where like a Dak Prescott, for example. You watch Dak navigate the pocket, and obviously Brady's one of the best, but just to throw him in a similar age group. But there's just times where you like him to feel something a little bit earlier and slide off the spot, get to the next read. But that's not his game yet. Maybe he's going to continue to progress, and maybe it won't be ever a huge part of his game, which is fine.
And it should be noted, before the season, we did call the Eagles' offensive line the best in the NFL. And while they did get off to a slow start, and it was not exactly the same offensive line that we were projecting for them, they are currently third in pass blocking efficiency. So going back to your point about him under pressure and getting from one read to the next, they are just so crucial because he needs that pocket, and he struggles under pressure. So we do want to see that part of his game get better. So the lightning rod that is Carson Wentz, always a nice, interesting discussion. I thought there was a lot of good stuff in there. Anything else to wrap it up on Wentz?
No, that's it. He had probably his best play of the year, I think, on the deep cross to Aguilar. He throws there's cover zero. It was 3rd and 19, and they were running cover zero. I wasn't completely sure what they were doing there, but sidestepped a guy with a quick pressure, and then made a great touch throw. It's hard to do that after you got to make a quick move and you kind of feel a little rushed with your body to be able to kind of reset and be able to put a good touch throw. I thought was probably his best play of the year, and something you definitely want to see a little more of.
Yeah, that is good. That's one of those things you said Dak does well on like checkdowns, like the quick reset and good touch and all that stuff. And then be able to throw that downfield with accuracy.
That's what he's got to do to take the next step, is the check down late in the progression where the pocket's closing in, just finding that outlet where Dak is, significantly better in that department right now.
A perfect segue, as they say in the business, Zach. Speaking of checkdowns, Alex Smith. Now, Alex Smith, we can't trash Alex Smith anymore. We can't call him Captain Checkdown. You can't do any of that stuff.
The jokes are dead, man. Now the joke's on us.
We now have to address him as MVP candidate Alex Smith. He's the next guy we're going to break down. And, man, he played another excellent game against the Houston Texans. Every single third down just felt like they were converting over and over and over, whether he was doing it inside the pocket, outside the pocket, finding room to get outside the pocket, to create space, to find the open man. He was doing it, and he's playing extremely well right now. To go through the stats, leading the league in passer rating at 125.8, and I still come back to, again, the context there. He's our number 2 overall graded quarterback right now, just a smidge ahead of Drew Brees, who is on bye, but leading the league in passer rating at 125.8. My caveat there is that two of those were the old rollout shovel pass. One of them was that late tap screen, Zach. Come on, those don't count as passes. The tap screen for like a 10-yard touchdown, those are just stat patters. So he's got a bunch of those in there, but I really don't want to take away from how well he's playing. So he's not playing at this 125.8 passer rating level, but the deep ball's here. He's up there in turnover-worthy big-time throws. He's the most accurate downfield thrower so far this season. He's still taking care of the football, number 2 in avoiding turnover-worthy plays. This is just some excellent play from Alex, even if there are some really nice schematic designs that are padding his stats even more.
Yeah, I mean, just about every stat that you run through on the signature stats on the website he's leading it. You mentioned under pressure, time in the pocket. He's completing 82% of his passes thrown under 2.5 seconds, and then he's also best after 2.5 seconds with the best passer rating and best completion percentage. So
now, that's different, right? So we sat here last year. We broke down Alex Smith. We broke down every quarterback individually. Wasn't that one of the stats that you cited? That hey, it has to be within 2.5 seconds for him. It has to be that quick
we
game.
talked about it, and it was last year, and I was watching and trying to figure out what it is, what's different. Last year he was pretty quick to drop the eyes down and not either he wasn't seeing stuff outside the pocket when he initially started to take off, or he just wasn't trusting his arm that he could make those throws on the move. I'm not sure which one it is. And this year he's seeing it. He's trusting his arm to make these throws, and we're seeing a ton of his scramble drill balls to the right that he's putting in perfect spots and finding guys. And we saw the other week last week, and then we saw it again on Sunday night. So I mean, he's playing and seeing the game at an extremely high level for him, and can he keep sustaining this type of stuff? Because he's got everything going right now. The biggest thing also is the seam routes down the seam to Travis Kelce. He's hit those, whether it was halfback seams, guys down the seams. He has put those in absolutely ideal spots. So. We'll see if he can keep, maintaining this level here.
Yeah, 2 of them Sunday night with really nice touch. The thing that you and I struggle with sometimes when we're watching college quarterbacks throwing seam routes is a lot of times the college offenses are so wide open that there's no underneath defender. There's no linebacker there because it's often RPO, and college defenses are generally just bad. So you're throwing up the seam into like an ocean. But Alex Smith, those were NFL seam routes that he had to throw to Kelce on Sunday. There's an underneath linebacker. There are deep safeties. You have to get the ball over the linebackers, in between the safeties, and he's putting them in very good spots. This 2.6 second cutoff, it's kind of a random one that we've come up with. It's on PFF Elite signature stats. It's all a part of that whole breakdown that you get when you subscribe to the package. But I do always find it interesting. This was the number we used when we described, hey, here's how Tom Brady took his game to the next level, was by extending plays and being a little bit more patient and not throwing the ball away as quickly as he had in the past. And that's how he helped his game in recent years. We are seeing Alex Smith do that. That touchdown that he threw on the move, it was running to his left. It's a 3-man rush in the red zone. And I just think you just have to have so much patience, right? When you get that 3-man rush, like if you can just know where these 3 rushers are, navigate either inside or outside the pocket just enough, somebody will get open at some point. That was a great play, and he's doing that more and more this year. I think that's why those 2.5 numbers are up there. I know that's what you were saying about him trusting his arm, but it's a fascinating thing for a guy that's been just this, within structure quick game guy, which he's really good at, and then adding this extra element to his game at this point in his career.
Yeah, I don't know how he's done it, because he's, I think, mentally always been kind of a quick trigger guy, like, wants to get the ball out of his hand, and it's this. So to be able to somehow, adjust that back, and maybe they're working on those types of plays more. I think that those don't get worked on enough in terms, you mentioned it, the 3-down, 3-man rush. You got to buy time and find a lane for a throw. Maybe they're working on those more, and he's just more comfortable, and maybe he's watching the rush develop first and then setting his eyes down the field. I've heard of guys that have actually done that before too. So whatever it is, he's doing it at a very efficient rate, and leading the league in all these different numbers.
What are your thoughts on what Andy Reid's doing with that offense? I mean, you've got the college-y concepts where they're running this shovel option, and you have Travis Kelce, you have Tyreek Hill, you have Kareem Hunt, who's probably the real MVP candidate on that team, which, that could flip as the season goes because the quarterback deserves more credit in general, but the quarterback will get more credit as the season unfolds. I mean, now they've got playmakers everywhere, and they're doing a good job of, scheming for these guys. What are your thoughts on what they've added this year to take advantage of those guys?
I love it. Everything that they do just kind of matches up run game wise, and all the misdirection. It's a ton for the defense to look at. We saw week 1 starting off with the Pats. I mean, they could not figure out. There's so much eye candy to look at, and then the ball is thrown the other way, and you got guys that are so quick with the ball in their hands, like Tyreek Hill, and then guys that can make guys miss, and Kareem Hunt. And so you got a perfect blend with the quarterback that's distributing and taking care of the ball and making those big shots down the field. So it's kind of all meshing up to be something pretty good right now.
It is one of the stories of the entire season, and when we sat here this summer and broke down Alex Smith for about a half hour, I kept coming back to this question, and I keep coming back to this whole, I've seen him do it, Zach. I've seen him do it. I remember the games, and he's the subject of Sam Monson and I are hashtag well actually this week on Sports Illustrated, where I do mention the specific games through his career where he showed this. And we break down how Alex Smith is doing it and throw some of these other numbers at you as well. Be sure to check that out. It'll be on our Twitter account, Sports Illustrated, SI Now on Twitter. But look, he's flashed it in the past, and I kept coming back to, how do you get more aggression out of this guy? Was it as simple as they drafted this polar opposite quarterback in Patrick Mahomes? And, I mean, it really is just a handful of throws per game where you got to be a little bit more aggressive, and he's doing it. So I don't know if it's completely sustainable because he's playing at such a high level, which we haven't seen before. So there should be some natural regression. But man, between the scheme, the playmakers, and his ability to still take care of the ball, it's a good start for him.
It is. I think the only thing is, and maybe we mentioned this before, just is his arm going to be sustainable and throw it as well as he's throwing it right now? I think, in years past we've seen it drop down like a lot of guys sometimes late in the season. Arm starts wearing a little bit. You're taking a lot of hits. Is his arm going to have the same juice in week 14 and beyond? I think is the biggest thing to watch.
I've seen a lot of people talk about this. How real is that? How different? I've never really played in a football game, Zach. How different do you feel beginning, middle, end of the season, game to game? And is there a big difference?
I think there is, and a lot of times it could be game to game, and sometimes you just go out there and you're just feeling it. When you start playing catch, the ball's coming out of your hand perfectly. It feels good, and you're just feeling it, and that's kind of how he's played this whole time. But there's definitely something to a guy just getting out there in one day. Accuracy wise, just everything that you're putting out there. There's no thought involved. You're just putting it on the money. Fortunately, I didn't have a whole lot of those, but that does happen. And I think for Alex Smith's case, it's certainly been this whole season so far.
So yeah, look, I understand that feeling. It's more that whole like my body's not at 100% feeling that I feel is a little underrated. I think that's just underrated because as a fan, you show up every Sunday and you watch the football team, right? And you're not, you might just change what type of nachos you have every week. But these guys might be feeling completely different, like you said, week to week or by week 14 and by week 17 and by the playoffs. And they're all playing hurt and banged up and some level of fatigue. And it changes things. So
yes, I'm with you on the injury part. That stuff is totally real. That in terms of, if you got some little tweak, sometimes it creeps into your head, and other guys can shut that stuff out big time and not even, just play all the way through any type of injury. And then you got more that it affects a little bit more. So it is very game to game, especially down the line here.
Yeah, so we'll see. He's a class of 2005. He's a slightly older quarterback and has to be able to sustain this. So great start for Alex Smith, both his general play, the stats are there, the scheme's looking great, and the Chiefs are undefeated. The big question is, will he be able to sustain it? And I don't have a clean answer, but I'm looking forward to watching because he's been very fun to watch so far this season. We have a couple bigger, deeper dive philosophical things we want to discuss. Before we do, we want to tell you guys about our friends over at Draft. That's draft.com or Draft in your app store. Find it and download it and play an awesome version of fantasy football. We started this before the year. Great partnership. They do best ball leagues, so if you draft a full season team, you don't have to make any changes. You don't have to worry about these injuries we're talking about. You don't have to worry about waiver wire or injuries. I have a bunch of teams already set in there, and my best players are being played every single week. It's a best ball league, but they also have other stuff. Head-to-head. You could do head-to-head drafts with one other person. You've got 3-person drafts, and then you have real money that you can win in these games, whether it's a $1 game, a $3 game, a $25 game. They have $100 games, and today we can give you a free $3 game once you make your first deposit over at Draft. Just go there and use the promo code PFF, and you get your first $3 game. And I suggest just playing multiple games. Spreading yourself thin a little bit, grab some different people, grab some different strategies, and that's how you maximize your experience over there. So go get your free $3 game. Use the promo code PFF. It's at draft.com or Draft in your app store. All right, Zach, we're going to change things up just a little bit here. Instead of focusing on one quarterback, we're going to do a little philosophizing. You brought this up. You brought up this general question, right? And everybody likes to ask the mythical front office executives, which the more and more I think about this, I'm pretty sure you could just make anything up and just claim that front office executives said it in the media these days. Is that fair to say?
That seems like the direction we've headed with anonymous sources inside the front office and those things. Whenever it says that, you almost kind of turn an eye and wonder what's really going on. So yeah, I'm with you.
I'm ready to go on all sorts of tangents today, but I mean that's one of them. As a person who I guess is considered to be in the media to a point, I could literally create any narrative I want and just claim that I talked to some players about it or some coaches or some front office people, and you can't even check me on it. So,
right.
So I might just start making stuff up over these next few months. But
I'll back you on it too, man.
Thank you.
Some wild stuff out there.
You could just say can confirm Steve's
yeah.
mythical sources. Look, the general question is class of 2016. You've got the number 1 overall pick Jared Goff, number 2 overall pick Carson Wentz, and then mid-round pick Dak Prescott, who certainly had the best season out of those 3 last year. And I think this is kind of the beauty of evaluation, especially with quarterbacks, these things are ever changing, because if you asked us coming out of college, I think it'd be Goff, Wentz, and then we'd all be saying, I don't know about this Dak guy. I don't even know if he's going to stay in the league. And then, of course, he comes out and has an excellent rookie season. So it's not as clean-cut, I don't think. We're 5 games into the 2017 season. We just talked about Wentz and some of his improvements and how he's handling the scheme. Jared Goff has done a 180 from last year. He's certainly not perfect, but he's at least shown that he could be a viable NFL quarterback after not showing that very much last season. And then Dak, a guy who could do very little wrong last year, has had a little bit more of a roller coaster ride this year. So I think it's a lot tighter of a discussion here. But where would you go? Who is your guy for the future if you had to choose between Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, and Dak at this point?
Yeah, I mean, a year and a half ago, I never thought you would get to it, but I would go with Dak. I just think,
really,
from a what you can do offensively with him, plus his decision making, he's more accurate, in certain areas than maybe we thought in college. I just think everything that he's got with the leadership, all that stuff. I would lean towards Dak. I just, in terms of what he can do from the pocket and outside the pocket, I think he's a little upgrade from both those guys. Just with, he's got a little bit better feel in the pocket than Wentz, and he's kind of a little tougher under pressure than Goff, and can kind of make more, tight pocket throws down the field with guys barreling down, really over both of those guys, but especially over Goff. But, he just does everything that you would want to formulate an offense around. He can get through progressions. He sees the field well, and he throws well on the move, and he's athletic. So I don't know. I was thinking, honestly, watching this past week, and he's gotten to be one of the top 3-4 guys to just watch play quarterback and watch play position behind kind of Brady, Rodgers, and Breeze and some of these older guys. He's gotten almost to that level where you're excited to watch him play, because he can hurt you in so many different ways, and he's just a talented guy.
So you're team Dak here, and honestly, I'm having a tough time arguing with that, because I think you laid it out really well. I think Goff and Wentz just have a couple more limitations, maybe compared to Dak. Yeah. And I keep, look, the PFF grade itself on Dak coming out of college wasn't great, but I did write the piece last year where we went back and we charted the accuracy, and you mentioned it. He was more accurate than anybody in that class when receivers had a step or so, just about a step or two of separation was the way we charted it, right? So it's that step of separation on a slant or on a go route or on a dig route or whatever it is. And that's going to be that's a big chunk of your NFL throws, So
right.
It's quite important to hit the open receiver, and he did it at a higher level than anyone else. And I think that's when we go back and we said, okay, that's one of those things. Forget the intangibles. That's one of those tangible things that he is actually doing better than so many other quarterbacks around him, namely Goff and Wentz. So he has that going for him. By the way, I'm gonna be on Team Dak as well. So I'm gonna be agreeable on this one. Nice. It is a lot tighter, though.
Yeah.
But here's maybe the thing that's...
Who are you two? Are you two with Wentz then Goff, or Goff Wentz? Is there any...
I'm not ready to put Goff over Wentz.
Yeah.
I think I have to put Wentz over Goff right now. But I just want to see if Goff continues to progress like I think he can. I think it really is a 1A, 1B type of situation for those guys. It really is just a different style. Wentz,
preference and style.
Yeah. I mean, Wentz, we're talking about the boom or bust part of his game just from a PFF grading standpoint. I think he's got that arm to make these, to make some special throws, and and he can work the short game pretty well. And Goff is showing he's throwing those seam routes the same way that he did in college, and that's how he's creating his big plays. But he doesn't have that little extra zip on the ball to maybe make the tight window throws when things aren't there that maybe Wentz has. So that's where I might put Wentz over Goff at the moment. I'm just talking myself in circles a little bit, but here's my selling point, right? Dak on Sunday against Green Bay, they're running run-pass options in the red zone. And a run-pass option essentially is just a play that breaks football, okay? It breaks the game of football because it's a running play where the quarterback can just pull the ball and throw it. And the defenders have to respect the run. So you're either going to have single coverage or wide open throw. And Dak is running this to perfection in the red zone, just pulling it up, throwing fade routes, a perfect fade to Dez, or he's throwing a backside slant, or whatever it is. And look, anybody can run an RPO, but Dak also has the ability to pull it and be a runner, a little bit more effective than these other guys. You just have this dangerous red zone threat that I think also helps to separate him from some of the other guys. I don't know how you stop that
I'm with you.
in the NFL.
No, I don't either. You look at just everything that he can do offensively, and I maybe mentioned it on the website last week. I don't know if there's a guy that throws better on the run. You could probably put Aaron Rodgers and maybe Matthew Stafford, but in terms of guys that just are accurate throwing on the run, Dak Prescott's top 2 or 3 in the NFL behind either Rodgers and Stafford, or however you want to spin it. But that added element of his game, we saw two plays last week where he's scrambling out and making big throws down the field to his right, has been a theme really his whole career that we've seen, and especially the last couple of weeks here. He's made some big throws, moving right, whether it's off of design play action boot or him just making a play out of structure. So it's crazy to think that it's gotten to this point that he's in the upper echelon of QB talk here just so quickly in his career.
I will come back to this, the same thing I've said the last few weeks when we do talk about Dak. I do want to see more of those games where, okay, you got to chuck the ball 40 times, and the run game's not there, and you need to carry the team. So there is that element that might be missing. I'm not saying Goff or Wentz can do that yet either. I'm just saying for Dak to take that next step, I want to see more of that from him when it comes up. When the game flow isn't there, the way that ideal game flow is not there, that run game and that the great offensive line from Dallas when they're playing at their best, when it's not there, Dak, go carry the team. And I thought he was fine against Green Bay. He threw a pick six that wasn't on him at all. Drop pass leads to a pick six, and he leads the comeback against Green Bay. But they just left too much time on the clock for the great Aaron Rodgers to do his thing. So
he almost hit that play to Beasley down the seam there to make it interesting at the end. He was just off on that one down the middle.
He was, and he left that play on the table, man. I mean, it's not an easy throw by any means, but I was actually shocked Green Bay had nobody in the middle of the field at all.
Yeah,
they would pretty much single coverage with everybody protecting deep and down the sideline, and he did have a play to make down the stretch there. I want to hear from everybody else. I want to hear from our listeners. We'll probably put a poll up on the PFF podcast account. Do you want Goff, Wentz, or Dak? Let's see who agrees with us. On the other end of things, I want to circle back to this class of 2004. These guys that seem like they're so old. They're all my age, Zach. They're all falling apart. Ben Roethlisberger, Philip Rivers, and Eli Manning. Mike Renner, our senior analyst here, one of our senior analysts, keeps bringing up the point. Why is this class of 2004, they seem like they've been in the league for 50 years, and they're old, and they're falling apart. And that class of 2005, just 1 year apart, that's Aaron Rodgers and Alex Smith, and they're in the MVP race looking better than ever. What is up with Ben, Rivers, and Manning? What do you think about their futures and just what they're dealing with at this point in their careers?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, they're all playing fairly similar, stylistically. They've got, they've got the things that make them what they are, and they're pocket passers that can stay in the pocket, navigate around, make plays that you shouldn't be able to make with tight pockets around you. And then you've got the decision making under pressure with all three guys that keeps showing up over and over and over, and they can't quite make maybe the throws that they could make under pressure, and you're seeing it result in more bad plays. But that's also just kind of all three of these guys' style that's been their whole career is they believe that they're going to make the play no matter what. They're going to soak every last bit of it for the play to work and to make a play. And so you see them force a lot of throws, and Rivers and Manning actually last week was pretty fun to watch. They had their mistakes, but then for the most part, those guys are playing under a lot of pressure, offensive line wise. Isn't ideal, and they're still finding completions. It might be a 5-yard check down here and there, but they're still able to play at a high level. It's just the turnover-worthy plays are what ends up killing them and hurting their teams and putting their teams in bad spots at times.
It does feel like Rivers and Manning, arm strength-wise, certainly not the same. They both used to have pretty good zip, and they could drive the ball down the field. That Rivers game a few weeks ago against the Kansas City Chiefs in particular, he was just floating passes up there. There's too many of those the last couple of years. And then you mentioned Roethlisberger maybe losing that extra step as far as being able to extend plays. So we're actually seeing physical traits taking a step back on these guys, and that would be concerning. The Steelers are still very much in the playoff race, and they're a solid team, but the Chargers and the Giants might be out of it very shortly if they're not out of it already. Poor Eli lost 4 receivers on Sunday. All 4 receivers went down, or 4 of his receivers went down, his top 3 especially. And things are falling apart.
He's been playing good. He's been playing good.
He's been playing better than I expected.
Better than what we saw in parts of last season. I think his arm looked a little bit better, and he's not making as many mistakes and was distributing it pretty well. But gosh, what do you got now with him and not a great offensive line and running game and down all these receivers? It's going to get really tough on him. So
yeah, on one hand, it's like, all right, there is not a good supporting cast either with the Giants or even the Chargers compared to what we expected as far as offensive line and the steps forward that they were supposed to take. So those teams do have some serious decisions to be made. To make. I don't think Rivers or Eli are done, but we could be getting into like fun NFL territory where those teams have to start looking to the future for quarterbacks. Do they get rid of Rivers? Do they get rid of Eli Manning? Do those guys sign somewhere else as just a veteran signing because they still have enough left to do some damage over the next couple of years with a good supporting cast? I think we're in for some unbelievable QB carousel at the end of the season between these old guys, between the draft class, between Ryan Tannehill.
You got Carson Palmer in there. Palmer is kind of in the Big Ben, Rivers, Manning, same type deal.
You're absolutely right. Palmer's 2 years removed from playing the best football of his career, but he's looked like that in very small spurts, but certainly just kind of regressed back into what he was previous, which is a middle of the pack, pretty good NFL quarterback who can make some really nice throws and generally makes, a lot of bad decisions in there. So, I think we're in for some great QB carousel this offseason. So I just wanted to address that.
If you got to rank these guys 1, 2, 3 when it's all said and done, what do you got?
I would go Ben, Rivers, Eli.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people like to point to the rings, and that immediately throws Eli at the front. And I'll say this: top end Eli Manning. I would put that up there with Ben and River. I'm fine with saying top-end Eli Manning might even be better than those guys. I just remember like a season and a half of that top-end Eli Manning. It just wasn't there.
Consistent enough, yeah.
Yeah, but his top end was his 2011 season, playing under pressure and essentially carrying that team was absolutely outstanding. But as far as full track record, I think Roethlisberger, Rivers, and then Eli. Where would you have these guys?
I got the same deal. I think if Ben's going to make it in the Hall of Fame, Eli's I guess up for discussion, and Rivers if everything was right kind of organizationally and as the Giants have got it right for the most part, and obviously the Steelers got a long track record. Rivers could be very much up there with Super Bowls with those guys. I think it's just you're splitting hairs with them, but I do like Big Ben overall, just with everything that he can bring extending the play.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And look, if you're the Giants and back in 2004 you traded Philip Rivers for Eli Manning, you're still ecstatic. You got 2 championships out of it. Even if Philip Rivers has been the better quarterback. I mean, throw for throw, and any way you break it down, Philip Rivers has been a better quarterback than Eli Manning. But I also don't think that the Giants would ever regret going and getting Eli Manning, who led them or was the quarterback on 2 championship teams. You're not going to trade that. So, the Giants are still happy with that trade, even though I still think Rivers is a better player overall.
Yep.
So, yes, good 2004 discussion. Also want to hear everybody's thoughts on that. What are your thoughts on the 2004 draft class, and these guys getting old. You want to just do a couple quick hitters, hit on a couple more guys, and then we'll wrap it up?
Yep, let's do it. Let's fire through.
All right. We haven't talked about Joe Flacco a ton. He's coming off one of his better games, inconsistent week to week, but what'd you see from Flacco against the Raiders?
Yeah, he was fine. He played his best game by far. Finally had a clean pocket game. I think he was only under pressure 4 snaps. So he's going to need that as he's going. Almost kind of like these other guys that we just got done talking to, is the offensive line right in front of him, because his play under pressure typically hasn't been all that great. So he got a clean pocket game. The offense was moving and had a good rhythm. So finally got something going for them, because those first 4 weeks offensively were pretty bad.
Yeah, four times pressured on 26 dropbacks. Even Khalil Mack could not make a difference for that Raiders defense. And Mack creates pressure against everybody, and he was good against the run, but did not have a pressure. Staying in the AFC North, Andy Dalton. As long as Andy's not playing under the lights, he's a pretty good quarterback. The poor guy, it's just like nobody watches the Bengals on Sunday at 1 when he's a pretty decent quarterback. They only see him on Thursday nights and Monday nights and Sunday nights when he seems to struggle under the lights. I think he was solid again against Buffalo. Yeah,
I think it's just going to take one game for him to kind of shake that. If he comes out and plays well, and I don't know what their remaining primetime games are, but shoot, it's just going to take one game for him to kind of kick that stigma. But right now he's throwing it as accurate as any quarterback in the NFL. He's always going to be a guy that can kind of fix it with his arm and not necessarily maybe navigate the pocket, but find a way, whether it's under pressure on his first or second read. Coverage might be tight, but he can fix it with his arm typically, and he's doing that at a very, very high level right now. And he's graded fairly well the past couple weeks. Couple bad plays. Had a dropped interception last week in the end zone that could have changed some things, but has for the most part taken better care of the ball since the first week of the season when he threw all those interceptions, and is throwing pretty accurately. So they're rolling a little bit offensively finally here.
One last guy, Carson Palmer, just mentioned him a few seconds ago. Let me just pull out the numbers real quick. Big time throws, he is second in the NFL. So those big time throws, the highest graded throws for PFF, those big chunk play opportunities, but also leading the NFL in turnover worthy plays. Classic Carson Palmer. What are you seeing so far from him?
It seems like it's almost you're watching the same game every week, and the stats you just had there is exactly what it's been. I mean, he's just been making some throws, then making some poor decisions under pressure, and that's just kind of been his deal. He's got 4 interceptions under pressure so far this season, but the big throws are there, so he can kind of keep you in the games enough. But gosh, they're in a tough spot there right now, and it doesn't appear offensive line wise like they can function enough for him to have sustainable success. It's kind of going to be week in, week out with how leaky things have been under pressure there.
Yeah, they're bad. And Sam's favorite stat every week on our review podcast is the pace that the Arizona Cardinals are on as far as pressures go. We've never seen an offensive line with more than something like 250 pressures allowed, and they're on pace for over 300 so far this season. Currently second worst in the NFL in pass blocking efficiency, just as a percentage behind the Houston Texans. So, yes, we've been talking about Roethlisberger and Rivers and Eli, and they're getting old. And poor Carson Palmer, that guy can't move. What's he going to do when he gets pressured? He cannot play football consistently behind that type of offensive line. And yeah, it shows up. It shows up in some of the bad decisions too. You could play better, but man, that is a tough way to go.
Yeah, I'm with you. We talked about it this past off season, kind of the direction that he was heading, and unfortunately right now there's just not enough pieces around him to be consistent week in and week out.
I think the theme we've come to is, every quarterback needs a good supporting cast around them, but these guys who have high-level potential, whether it is a Palmer, Roethlisberger, Rivers, Eli, they really need these pieces to be right around them as they age. And It's leading to some ugly quarterback play. I had a fun time on this episode. We were all over the place. We discussed a whole lot of things, but that's what we do here, discussing NFL quarterbacks every single Tuesday with Zach and myself. We love your feedback as well. Hit up Zach on Twitter at Zach_Robinson5. I am at PFF_Steve. If you're just listening for the first time, please hit that subscribe button. We've got 4 big episodes of the PFF podcast every single week. Slightly different themes for all of them. The Wednesday episode is the mailbag version with Sam Monson and myself. You guys fuel that whole thing, so be sure to send us your emails at podcasts@profootballfocus.com, and we can hopefully answer your question on that podcast as well. And let us know which quarterbacks you want to hear about next week. We'll break guys down in depth. If you're interested in all of the numbers and stats and all of the fun stuff that we've been pulling out, most of the fun stuff that we've been pulling out here today, it's all at PFF Edge or PFF Elite. Edge, your best offer is going to be found at profootballfocus.com/PFF-offers. That is our cheapest, best offer to get Edge. And then Elite, you guys can actually get it for free if you leave a 5-star review in iTunes. Leave your email address or a Twitter handle so we can get in touch with you. Elite now has game grades dating back to 2016, so you can get game-by-game grades for the first time ever. We let our Elite guys do whatever they want. It is our best package. Go and check it out. It's all at profootballfocus.com. And that's it for us today. We'll chat again next time. Thanks again to everybody for listening.